Hello there, welcome back to another episode of Point and Click Puzzle Games with myself, Angela McCall, and we're up to lesson 5 of our Tic Tac Toe app build journey. And in today's video we are going to be looking at sort of pimping up and doing some cosmetic sort of tweaks and changes to make our user experience a lot more friendly by tweaking display objects from the display library, things that we've created already, and we're all going to be looking at using our own fonts instead of the native system font, and it's all happening in today's video. Cool stuff. Thank you very much for being here. Do subscribe, stay notified, put your comments below. I do dive in 2 or 3 times a week to sort of reply to any comments I receive on my YouTube videos, and so I'd love to hear what you think about this video and if you've got any questions. So today we are talking about basically pimping up the cosmetics, like your makeup bag as it were, for your app. What we are going to do and some of the things that we're going to do to bring our app now a little bit more to life. So let's quickly take a look over at it from where we left off on our last episode. So we've now managed to get a nice display, and we've got this very simple X or cross and our naught symbol. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off dealing with fonts now. I'm going to start by scrolling up to the top of the page here, and before we dive into fonts, I want to point out that at the moment our noughts and crosses are using the system's native font, which is fine and dandy, but it's a bit plain and boring. It does the job, but we want to make it look a little bit more cosmetically nicer. So we are going to have to basically import a font into our app file structure. Now I'm just going to come over to my Windows folder here, and I'm just going to go to my Corona projects, because the app that I have just been building and which I'm off testing at the moment, I've actually created a fonts folder. And in here are some fonts that I were playing with, and I think the font that I've been using for my theme so far is this kind of like Brady Bunch font, which was an old TV program if you guys remember, but it kind of suited the style of the app that I wanted to create. So I'm actually going to cheat, and I'm going to copy this entire font folder. Now I'm going to just show you how to get around this, because obviously you won't have that. So I'm just going to copy, and I'm just going to literally drop that entire folder into my Tic Tac Toe, so that for the demonstration of this tutorial today I can proceed. But let's minimize that back down. Okay, you guys are going to want to do this for yourselves. So there's a couple of things that you're going to need to learn. First of all, let's look at Google Fonts. This is a free online tool that will allow you to basically pick fonts out, download them, and you can store them wherever you want. You can use them on your website, you can use them in your print media, brochures, logos, this, that and the other. We're obviously going to be using it in our app. Now this particular one here, this just happens to be the landing page that they seem to have updated at the moment. This particular font looks quite fun and funky. Okay, so let's say we wanted to work with this particular font. Well, once you've got the font that you want, there's a download button. Okay, and it's going to download it as a file, like any other file, a zip file, which you would need to go and basically unzip on your computer. So there's my downloads folder. So you can go into it, and all you need to do is unzip it any way that you want. So I'm going to extract that. Now it's going to extract it into the downloads folder. Let's just put this for the moment, for the sake of being able to demonstrate things to you. Let's put it on the desktop so I can find it nice, quick and easy. I'm going to extract it. Okay, we've got our font, it's on our desktop somewhere. Okay, so what we can do now is we can work with it. Now before we go in and dive into that, I have brought up here, and again it's in the documentation for Corona Labs. They have got a developer guide called User Interface and Scenes. And inside that there is a fonts section. It does explain some of the font types, the difference between an open type and a true type font and how they work, and how you can bring them in and display them. So it's essentially a bit like what we did with the images. We need to just basically store the font in a folder in our app hierarchy, and then just literally list it. Now they are using TTF fonts, which is true type font. Okay, and if you look at the code here in this example, they've created a they're using that native fonts here, but they've created a text object, they've named it, they've given it a size and that kind of thing. So we're going to look at that in a bit more detail. So that's where you can find out this guide. And here is the new display text object that we're actually going to be working with itself. So again, a bit like the images or the rectangles, whatever it was that we used earlier, there's options, and we can also use a legacy version, but it's always good practice to work with the most current version of our syntax that's available. So essentially we pass a lot of parameters, which are all the controlling aspects of the font, to it in a variable called options, which is like a table of data that we apply to this new text object, which we then display on our app. Okay, and again, as all display objects, we can put it into a group. So as we build this one today, we're going to build this inline and put our we're going to put them into our groups as well if we haven't already. Okay, so let's have a look what we've got going down here. Now this one here, this multi-line text right aligned, there's the right alignment, we can change it to left or center, but we've got, these are the parameters and these are the options. So it's a bit like when we actually created our noughts and our crosses to start with. We tweaked this. Some of these are optional, you don't have to include them, like the width and the height and that kind of thing. It will use system defaults, and then obviously we've got our properties and methods. We can set our method set fill color to, and that would be the 100% red and 00 on the green and the blue. So that's basically what's going on here. So these are the options that we've created. Instead of putting like hello world or a name, we've literally put the capital letter O for a nought and a capital letter X for a cross. Now we need to style it, so we're going to actually use a different font to what's going on there. Okay, so for the moment we have to use something in our process. Let's bring that back up and go back to that last screen. Oh, and the one before that. There we go, new fonts. So if we look down here, where have we gone? We can use different types of, we have to have a font named, okay, and you can run a search to see what native fonts are available, but what we're going to do is, for example, we've been using the system font at the time of creating the object, but what we can do is we can go in, like here, instead of say native font, we are going to basically change that to say fonts / and the name of our file. So what we are going to do is let's go into our fonts, and it's our Brady Bunch name. Oh, I want to copy, rename it, so I just want to copy the whole file name, copy, and we know it's inside this fonts folder. Okay, so instead of doing that, let's just comment out that particular line, okay, and then come down underneath it. So if everything goes wrong, we can come back to it. So we're going to retype the word font, and we're going to assign to it using the equal operator sign. We're going to assign to it fonts / and then the name of our font, but we're going to put it inside the quotes because of the fact that it's not a native system font command, and we've got to put the comma at the end because that's our way of creating like a little mini table inside this parameter, so we can also set the size. Okay, so let's see. So this is on the noughts that I've been playing with, so let's set save. Okay, and now our noughts, there we go, you can see it's a completely different style. Okay, so we know it works, which means we can delete that line of code because we've now got this code that's working. So we're going to replace that. Okay, and there we go, that's job done. So let's change our cross as well. Okay, so I'm probably going to make them a tad bit bigger, so 120 and 120 instead. Let's change that. Okay, so now we've got our noughts and our crosses, and they're all working fine, but they're still overlapping. But that's a problem for another day as we start to get the users to place them on the screen. But we can see physically the presentation of our noughts and our crosses are nice, but we possibly don't like the colour. So where we go down into the actual show did, so remember we create our app, but these noughts and crosses don't show until the app is fully functioning on our screen, and so therefore we want to put them in the show did because our app has now done its thing and our players are going to be playing with them. But let's change using these fill methods here. We want to tweak these a little bit. Now I did say to you I was going to talk to you about RGB values. These are basically set from 0 to 1, so 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, all the way up until you get to the whole number 1, okay? But you literally can think of it as percentages. So it's 0.1 is like 10% blue or green or red, depending on which position in our RGB format we are in. So I know that from the styling of my game before, that I've tweaked and I've played with my colour code. So I'm just literally redesigning my app. So I'm just going to look for my colour codes. So I know from having already tweaked and played with my other app that I'm actually publishing at the moment, the settings. So for example, my noughts, let's just say we are doing the noughts as the sort of reddish colour, as it were. So I'm going to leave it 100%, which is 1 in the red. I'm going to put 0.2 in the green and 0.1 in the blue. And over here for the crosses, I'm going to put 0.1. Oh, she says, perhaps if I look at the screen when I'm typing, then I'm going to put 0.5 in this part in the green, and then we're going to keep the blue as 100%. So I'm just going to save that, and you'll see that this will tweak the colours now. Okay, so it's a lighter blue and a bit more friendlier red, okay, because it's got a hint of green and a hint of blue in it to make it a bit more friendlier. And again, likewise, it's got a hint of red and a hint of green in the blue. So that's how I've changed my colours. Say for example, I want to change these black grid lines because I don't particularly like them. They're not particularly friendly, I don't think. So let's tweak this, and also let's give a fatter border around the outside of our grid to sort of give it some emphasis. So I'm going to go back up here where we have been creating our objects for our screen, as it were. Now, because we're not actually going to do anything with the image that I'm about to create here, this object that's going to be like the border, as it were, I'm going to create it up here in this create section, because once it's done and we don't need to use it anymore. So let's just tidy up our code a little bit more, and in here I'm going to call this grid border, okay? And just to keep myself in good, yeah, we don't need to use it anywhere, so I'm going to put local grid border. There we go. It's going to be a new display dot new rectangle, because we want nice crisp corners, so it's not a rounded rectangle. And I'm going to just save that there, and we are now going to need to populate it. So first thing we're going to do, if you remember the syntax that was in use, is we are going to put it into a group. Now I want this to be part of, where's my display up here? Let's go to new rectangle and I'll show you the syntax. New rectangle. So here we go. We want to be able to put it in a parent group. So remember in my last tutorial I was talking to you about groups. So we've got this group here called board background and board foreground. So I'm actually going to put it in the board background, okay? Okay, and then we put a comma. Then we are going to create the actual object itself. So looking at the syntax here, we need to give it an X, Y position on the screen, and we need to give it a width and a height. So because we've got 100, 100, 100, which is 3 by 3, I'm just going to essentially just cheat in this sense and just put display dot content center X for its X location display dot content center Y for its very center location, and then I'm literally going to say it's 300 by Y by 300 in height. Now technically I should have done some maths off of the objects that are going inside it, but for now, because this is a very simple app and I just want to get this job done, I've put it on the screen like that. Now what's happened is we've now put it in this, but it's sitting on top, which is fine because we're going to do something else with it in a second. Okay, so our other squares are behind. What we're going to do now is we can change the alpha of the content. Now if I was to make the actual fill, this white box, actually transparent, it means that the border would also become transparent. So I'm actually going to cheat and do alpha. I think it's a property. I've just got to just double check it's not a method, but I'm going to set that to 0.1. okay, so I'm going to save that for a second. So it's still there, but it's now almost invisible. So you can't actually really see with the human eye that the border, the actual fill is semi-transparent. I mean, if I was to make it 5, it would make these lines now a little bit more musky. There you go, now they're grey, and obviously this, it's sitting on top even than the background, the foreground group which is in there. So we need to change the ordering position, but we actually want to give this a border that really stands out. So we are going to put the stroke, if I remember rightly, is going to be, let's make it 10 just to make it really thick so you can see it. So what we've got here is a method called set fill color. Our value is black, 100% red, 100% green, 100% blue, but only 0.1% on the fill. Let's save that and see what happens. Right, so now what we've got is practically a transparent fill, which makes the boxes underneath shine through quite nicely, and we've got this nice big fat border around the outside. But I don't particularly like the colour grey, and I'm going to stay in keeping with my app theme so far. So I'm just going to change that first one. So we get rid of the grey and it makes it that kind of turquoises, which is kind of going with my actual theme, which means I also just want to copy this stroke colour there, so they change as well. So we get rid of those black lines. And now you can see how we've started to customise and really sort of pimp up. It's not that exciting, but it's literally just the coloured border, and it just makes things a little bit more in keeping with the rest of the app. Now, we were also going to add in my logo and the name. Now, again, I'm going to cheat because this isn't a graphics channel teaching you how to do your graphics. So let's just presume you've already done your images, and as you can see, these are loads and loads of images that I've already created. These are all my buttons, but there is my logo, okay, which is got like a kind of a graduated effect and a slight tint. It's a transparent PNG file, which is all good, so we're going to be using that. And we are going to be using my logo again. We're going to shrink it down and we're going to twist it a little bit. So I'm just going to copy both of those for the moment and go back and drop them into my game that I'm building with you. We've got an images folder already going on. There we go. So there's the 2 files that we're going to use. Okay, so let's just slide this on down a little bit. Oh, move this over so I can see them. Okay, so these are the images that we are going to be using and displaying on here. So these are the image rectangles, a bit like the way that we actually created this for our background. So let's just come up here right now. So local variable, I'm going to put and click logo equals display new image rectangle, and I'm also going to, I've got to fill in the parameters, I know. I'm also going to put in a logo. So as always, I always like to write my sort of syntax in full, and then I add in my parameters. So with this one here, I'm going to come down, this is the image logo itself, the square one, so I'm going to come on here and right click rename, which allows me to nicely copy the entire name as a bit of a cheat, and I'm going to put images because we know it's in the images folder, and then I'm going to paste the file name, and then I'm just going to make sure that is fully in double quotes. I'm then going to put a comma because we need to give it its location, so I'm going to display. If you remember in any of my other tutorials, I always center everything on the screen first of all, and then I worry about where they go because then I can physically see them. Display dot content center Y, the width and the height of the image. Now on here, if we look in the properties, this is going to be a 300 by 300 pixel, so that's actually quite big. So let me just put it in there as 300 by 300 for the moment as the width and the height. So that will solve that image, and then we just got to do the same with the rectangle for our actual game logo. Okay, so 300 by 300, as we know, our board is 300 by 300, so it's very big. So what we could do here is I'm going to divide it by, say, 8, just to see how small that makes it. Or if we wanted to, we could actually set a specific size. Let's see what happens there. So 8 goes really quite small. See, I can actually do maths, or I can actually set the size. There we go. And then what we're going to do is on this image, we're going to give it another little feature, which is a rotate. So dot rotate equals, and I think it's 10. There we go. And so now if I go back to the -10, there we go. So there's my little logo. In fact, it's still a bit big, so let's make it sort of 70, I think. And then we'll position that up in the corner in a second. Okay, So we need to position it up in the top left corner, which we'll do the maths for in just a second. And the other image that we've got is the game title as well. So again, from the middle of the screen, let's, because we want to move it up, which is going north, so we're going to be in a minus number. So let's minus that by 200 and see what happens. And then you just play until you've done it. So let's go 300. And then we're going to go, because we want to go to the west, so we're going to do a minus number. Let's make that 100 as well. Save. Okay, so that's not doing too bad. I think my logo is still probably a bit big. Let's make it a 6 instead, and just move it over another 10 pixels as well. Right, that's probably better. And then this is still a bit big, so let's make it, divide it by 5 and divide it by 5. And then we're going to probably change the colour of it as well. Dot set fill colour to, and then it was my 0.5, I think it was 1 if I remember rightly. Oh, 1 and 1, where's it gone? There we go, save. Okay, so we're going to add the little message on the screen here now as well. So I'm just gonna, I've literally copied this over just to save a little bit of time on the video, but we're creating a local message, and then we've got the options for it. And the reason message is here and not inside the create is because we're going to need to access this variable when we create it, when we change the message on the screen to the user. So the initial message when we decide whose turn goes first, and then when we've actually playing, it's going to have to change and update. So there's lots of different places within our scene that we're going to need to access this message. So I've got the variable sitting out there inside the parent area of the entire scene, and then the options. So we're going to put it in the group user interface, which I have got as abbreviated in this here as group interface. There we go. We're going to set it, it has to be a text, which is why it's got an empty, because for the moment we've got nothing there. So let me just show you. It's going to be positioned in the center of the screen, which is great here. We want to, I basically have positioned it from the center of the screen upwards, 210 pixels or units. The width, because the message might need to wrap, I'm taking now, instead of doing content center X, content center Y, there's also a display content width. So this is basically getting the entire width of our device. And then I've basically deducted 20 to bring it in 10 bits from the right, 10 bits from the left, just so that there's a little bit of a barrier and our text, if it does need to wrap, doesn't go off the screen. We're going to use the font that we've already created and brought into our app down here. We're displaying our noughts and crosses to keep everything in custom. We've designed the size, and it's going to be aligned center. So all of this stuff we've already touched on, which is why I'm just copying and pasting from the other screen. I'm just going to hit save, and hopefully now we've got a little message. Oh, we have got to display it. Of course we have. Right, let's come on down here and now create the object itself. So obviously we're going to need to do this up in the show wheel section, because we need to update it regularly. So let's say we've created all the board, but we actually need to change this. So we're going to create it here. So it initially shows, we're going to create a new text a new text variable with the options that we've just created up here. So now the object physically exists, and then what we can do is we can update it in other areas of our game. So there we go, we've got our hello world, and it's kind of positioned where we wanted it to, purely because I've already done the maths and the playing and tweaking. Now it does mean that this board is actually quite low down, so let's just move the board itself up. So instead of 100 pixels, let's move it down by about 30, so it's positioned a bit nicer on screen. Let's just change it to 20. There we go. So everything's starting to position quite nicely here for today's video. So I know it's a bit disjointed in places. There's not huge amounts going on at the moment, but I just thought those couple of little tweaks, dealing with some fonts, would really help with regards to getting some of the cosmetics and understanding some of the things that we can do. So don't get yourselves confused between methods and properties. Sometimes it can be weird, because there's sometimes, like the stroke or fill colours as it were, there's actually a property method and a method, if that makes sense. So there's sometimes you can easily sort of mix your syntax as it were, but so always refer to the syntax guide, and then you can't go wrong, and you don't spend ages trying to figure out what's happening. So our app is coming together quite nicely.